feathered bun that he noted was threatening to fall. Afraid it would do so and cloak her beauty before he'd fully explored it, Callum let his gaze drop. His eyes slid over the hollows and planes of her back, then to the soft round curves of her hips, before his view was finally obscured. However, it wasn't her hair that blocked his view. It was the back of a man suddenly stepping in the way that hid the little blonde from him. Callum shifted to the side a bit in the hopes of catching a glimpse of the girl again, but the man was still in the way. He scowled at the unknowing man's back for destroying his view and wondered where he'd come from. The clearing had been empty of anything but the mare when he'd first peered out, and Callum hadn't heard the sound of hoofbeats to warn of anyone's approach. He supposed the man must be with the girl. He must have ridden in with her on the one horse and been off relieving himself in the bushes when Callum first glanced out. His thoughts scattered as the man suddenly shifted and the girl was again revealed. Callum had a very brief glimpse of her creamy perfection, then her hair finally escaped its bindings and fell around her shoulders, cloaking her in golden tresses. The horrible warbling promptly ended as she tisked her displeasure and reached up to catch the wayward hair at the nape of her neck. She performed the manoeuvres necessary to return it to the top of her head. Callum stared with fascination at the curve of breast revealed by her raised arms and wished she'd turn in the water so that he could see all of that breast. Luck wasn't with him, however, and she didn't. The girl had just finished with her hair when the man spoke. "Lady de Courcy." The greeting was filled with a sly amusement Callum didn't care for. He watched as the girl stiffened with surprise, then dropped her hands to cover herself and sank back into the water as she turned to face shore. Her wide alarmed eyes told Callum at once that he'd misjudged the situation. The man wasn't with her. He supposed that meant the other 3 men who suddenly moved into view in the clearing weren't either. Callum heaved a small sigh, his hand moving down to clasp the grip of his sword as he listened to the exchange. "Jocks!" The woman sounded confused and weary. "What do you want?" "Lord d'Angers wishes to see you," the man announced. "He sent us to bring you to him." Rather than reassure the girl, this news seemed to make her more wary. "Why did he not call on me at de Courcy?" "He knows your father is ill, and had no wish to trouble him with company," the man said blithely. Callum saw the girl's mouth tighten. "You mean he knows my father is ill and hopes to force me to marry him so that he might take over de Courcy and merge it with his land once father is dead," she said shortly. "You may tell him I am not interested." "I fear you shall have to tell him yourself. I have orders to bring you to him, and bring you to him I will." "Kidnap me, you mean?" she said bitterly. The man inclined his head. "Call it what you will. I have my orders." Callum watched the girl, seeing the way her eyes now shot around the clearing from her clothes to her mount to the surrounding woods, then along the river bank. She was seeking an escape route, but there wasn't one to be had. One of the 4 men had taken her mount by the reins, the other had gathered up her gown and chemise. The men now simply stood, waiting. If she tried to swim up or downstream, they would follow. Her only choice was to stay in the water until they tired and went in after her, or come out under her own power. Callum shifted in the silence, telling himself it wasn't any of his business. Despite that, his gaze kept returning to the girl, noting the pretty face, the lovely honey hair, and the proud, grim expression that belied the fear he could sense coming from her. She was in a fix, that was certain, and she was alone against 4 men. 1 chit against 4 men hardly seemed a fair fight to him. On the other hand, it wasn't any of his business, Callum reminded himself again. He'd merely stopped to rest for the day before continuing on with his journey at sunset, but "The hell!" Callum muttered under his breath and started to push his way through the bush at the mouth of the cave. Sarah de Courcy stared at the men before her with frustration. She was in a fine bind and she knew it. d'Angers had hinted at his intentions when her father's health had first begun to fail, suggesting a merger of their lands and titles could be of great benefit to them both. Sarah had stared at him with open horror at the suggestion. The man was her